Joe here. Thanks for visiting Road Trip Joe, and thank you for being my patron. Today we're doing a little painting. Some of you know I'm a painter. Some of you don't. That's okay. It's not that I've sold any paintings or not, but I like to think it's because I haven't put any up for sale. Today I'm painting something for my friend Steve, who lives in Artesia, New Mexico. Now Steve and I go like way back. We go way, way back. All the way to high school.
I don't want girls being picky about me. I just find a girl who aims to be true. She drinks a lot of beer and likes hot spicy food. She's a real humdinger, she's a hullabaloo. She takes me apart, she lays me on blue. Smart as a whip, she takes me to school. She's a fine young thing who likes good barbecue.
This is my friend Steve. Like I said, we go all the way back to high school. I first met Steve in the fall of 1972. Steve had always gone to Catholic boys' schools, but when his school shut down for lack of funding, or whatever reason, he and all the other guys had to transfer to a dreaded public school, and Steve ended up at mine. Now, Steve and I have very little in common, but we are living proof that two people who can't agree on most anything can still be good friends. And we have been for 46 years. I was the best man at Steve's wedding, and after he and Mary got married out of college, they ended up in Artesia, New Mexico. They both had careers in education, and Steve at one point got his master's in education and became a middle school principal. He knows everyone in that little town. Steve and Mary raised two kids, Kim and Buddy, and they have two grandkids who live in Washington, D.C., which is where Mary spends most of her time. Mary is a very smart woman. Steve, of course, hardly ever leaves New Mexico, but he has over the years to come visit me in California or Nevada, and we always have a good time. And occasionally we get lucky in Vegas, although that doesn't happen very often. And of course, Steve likes to get tattoos and fire off a machine gun. You could use a little target practice there, buddy. Now, there are a couple of reasons I'm painting this picture for my friend Steve. One is that a few years ago when he came to visit, I asked him to paint something for me so I could hang it up in my guest bedroom along with all the other guests' paintings. Steve probably hadn't painted since the 3rd grade, but he did his best and seemed to enjoy it, like I do. It's not that it's therapeutic, although it probably is. For me, it makes me focus on one thing, which pushes all the other stuff to the other side of my brain. It's more calming to me, really. And to Steve, too, it seems. And of course, we had the picture hanging ceremony in the bedroom after he was done. Looks good, Steve. Thanks, man. Now, over the years, Steve taught himself woodworking and built this ever-expanding shop next to his house. The guy owns every tool known to man, much to Mary's chagrin. And even though he's retired now, he still does a little work on the side as an escort. Yes, that's what Steve likes to call himself, an escort. What he escorts, though, are those big rigs that get trucked around in eastern New Mexico to find some new oil and gas after they shoot a bunch of chemicals in the ground. Steve drives a big truck and usually takes his dog Roscoe with him to keep him company. Steve dragged me out there once for the day, and I soon realized that Steve rarely even gets out of his truck. But the other reason I'm painting this picture for Steve is so he can hang it up in the back of his shop. I'll tell you a little more about that later, but the real story I want to tell you about my friend Steve is when he helped me build my teardrop trailer. Now, I like to camp, but a few years ago I decided that sleeping in a tent and on the ground wasn't that much fun anymore. So after some research, I discovered these little teardrop trailers that you can pull with a car. It's basically a bed on wheels with a galley in the back. After watching some YouTube videos of people building these in a few weekends in their garage, I made the decision that I wanted to do that too. Now, I don't have a shop and really just own a couple of screwdrivers, so I immediately thought of my friend Steve and his huge shop and all those tools in Artesia. So I called Steve, told him what I wanted to do, and he said, "Sure, come on." I found a lot of pre-made stuff on the internet and some plans and started sending them all to Steve's house in New Mexico. I outlined for Steve what I was thinking, what kind of trailer I wanted, and provided him with the plans so he could go over them before I showed up. I figured 3 or 4 trips to Artesia would do it, and I'd be the proud new owner of this new cool looking teardrop trailer. Now I have to stop and say right now that there's no way I could have done this without Steve's help, or his shop for that matter. So if it sounds like I'm making fun of my friend Steve, well, I am. Just remember, Steve and I have been friends for 46 years, and we can pretty much say whatever we want to each other without any bruised feelings. He calls me an idiot, and I call him an imbecile, and we're usually laughing while we're saying it, which is probably a good thing. Steve gives me a hard time, trust me. But my superior intellect usually gets the best of him. Well, most of the time. Okay, back to my trailer. It's a 2-day drive to Artesia, and on my first trip there, I pull into Steve's place, and he comes outside and meets me and says, "Come on into the shop, I have something to show you." We go inside his shop, and there's all my stuff I'd sent ahead of time, which was great. Steve said, "Look what I did for you." On one of his tables were the sides to my trailer that I had pre-cut along with the aluminum I had cut to fit them. Steve had glued the aluminum to the sides of the trailer. Now, I had just gotten out of the car after being on the road for 2 days, and even though I was a little tired, I realized that something just wasn't quite right with this picture. And then it hit me. "Steve," I said, "you didn't read the instructions, did you?" Steve, it seems, had skipped the other 126 steps in the instructions. The aluminum goes on last, so it covers up all the screws and nails that are used to attach the side of the trailer to the front and the back of the teardrop. It, of course, gives it a cleaner look, but more importantly, it makes it watertight for when it rains. Steve's response, of course, was that they probably got it all wrong, and this will work out fine. "We'll just put some rivets in there," he said, "with some seals so the rain doesn't come in." So, there are instructions, and then there are Steve's instructions. And that's the way our little project started. Of course, my trailer kind of looked like a rhinestone cowboy trailer at the end with all those rivets. But Steve made it work. What's a little moisture in your trailer, right? It also became immediately clear to me that Steve liked to do things twice, which was confirmed with a call with Mary, who was still hanging out in Washington, D.C. the entire time. "Steve likes to do things twice, you know," she said. No kidding. When it was all over, I bought enough material to build 2 teardrop trailers. Putting doors upside down on the trailer can be an issue too, of course. I mean, the word up, with an arrow pointing up, means, well, up, right? I think some of our issues that we ran across might have had to do with Steve's defective tape measure. It's missing ½ an inch on the end of it. If you think I'm kidding, I'm not. Tens of thousands of dollars of tools and equipment in his shop, and he has a tape measure that doesn't work. We found that out the hard way, I'm afraid. But like I said, I never could have done this without Steve's help. I never would have attempted it, actually. But Steve liked having me around since Mary was gone, and I can honestly say that I had a great time. Took a little longer than I thought, but so what? We had fun. Something else I realized while I was there is that Steve doesn't really like to cook, so we went out to eat most of the time. Now, there's not too many restaurants in Artesia to choose from, so our selections were fairly narrow. It was Mexican food or steak or Chinese food, in that order, of course, with the occasional DQ blizzard. And like any old guy, Steve has his routine. In the morning, he'd get up, sit with his coffee in the dark, to save electricity, of course. Then he'd take a shower, dress, and then head down in his truck to Allsup's, which is New Mexico's version of a 7-Eleven, for a big gulp full of Dr. Pepper. And then, of course, he'd go visit some people he hadn't seen in a while. Our work usually started about noon. But I learned to use his tools and equipment, and on the days he had to go escort or something, I would work on my trailer. When we got it done, I thanked Steve and took off to Nevada with my new little teardrop. I stayed in Deming, New Mexico the first night, and of course it rained. Like I said, what's a little moisture, right? So the other reason I'm painting this picture for Steve is that it's a picture of the back of Steve's shop, where all my leftover wood from my trailer hangs out. Steve doesn't really believe in windows, so if he hangs this up in the back of his shop, he can look at it and see what's outside. Can you tell I spent a lot of time in Steve's shop? Thanks, Steve. I never could have built this teardrop without you, and I mean that. I'm thinking about a cabin in the woods now. You up for that? Oh, and thanks for taking down the Trump sign in your front yard while I was there this last Christmas. That was a nice gesture. So, there you have it. This is my friend Steve. It's been a great 46 years, amigo. And Mary, you are a saint. That's all I got.
You say I'm not good looking, but you must be mistooken, 'cause 100,000 women can't be wrong. Well, you don't like my kissing, you say there's something missing, but 100,000 women can't be wrong. Well, when I ask you for a kiss, baby, you just turn me down. When it comes to loving, I'm the best there is in town. You don't like my loving or my turtle doving, but 100,000 women can't be wrong. Tell 'em about it, Scramble.
Tell me a little bit about what we did today.
We had fun.
Did we? Yeah.
Yeah.
And how's your handiwork there?
Well, it looks pretty decent to me.
I notice you still have some clamps on here.
Yeah.
Seems to be kind of a
That's-
large gap right in here.
Yeah.
somewhere.
But that's okay. It's because Joe did the measuring.
Because Joe bought the pieces.
Joe did the measuring.
Okay, it's Joe's fault. All right, I'm plugging Steve in. Here's the plug. I have my job again. Of course, we are redoing things again because
Joe, would you put your finger right here, please?
no,
I
because
need to test something.
we have a piece of wood that fit originally, but now it doesn't. Steve, doing a little drilling work. That's not looking too good, but I think he's got a handle on it. Yeah. A hammer is always good.
Pretty hot in his overalls.
I am hot in my overalls. All right, I would say this is about 80% done. Steve would say it's about 20% done.
That's what I was going to say.
So we're going to let you go. As you can tell, we're building and then tearing it apart and then rebuilding. Okay. More updates later. Here in Artesia, New Mexico, we've gotten this far on our little trailer. You notice the straps are on. We'll just take a real quick look at the inside. Remember the inside, how pretty it was? So we're going to come back, Steve, and
I made him take it off because it was ugly.
Steve, give us a little rundown in the morning. It's about 11:30 Artesia time.
We are now 26.5% finished.
That's what I thought you guys said. So give us a rundown of what we did this morning.
This morning we skinned it. In other words, we put the roof on to just give it a little, let it shape itself to the form. We cut out a piece down here that'll help the hinge hatch seat and do what it's supposed to do.
We're missing a really important piece of the teardrop, aren't we?
Yeah, they didn't send us enough tin. Joe was remiss in his duties.
No, Joe is not remiss in his duties. Let me tell you, Joe looks good in his overalls.
Yeah,
But-
Joe does look like a man in those overalls.
But you remember the?
You know, the reason I bought Joe overalls is because he was running out of underwear.
That's
Now he doesn't
correct.
have to wear any.
Remember the boards I put up yesterday? It looked really nice. Well, Steve took them down. Steve took them all down.
Well, we had to in order to get the router in there.
So right now we're kind of building, tearing it down, building, tearing it down.
Well, you know, Albert Einstein or Thomas Edison didn't get it right on the first time either.
Steve, I hate to tell you, you're not Albert.
I don't know. Sometimes I kind of look like him.
Made it to Artesia. I'm here with my buddy Steve. Say hi, Steve.
Hi, Steve.
Okay, there we go. Steve is making Christmas presents. Just like a day or two before Christmas. And what are you making, Steve?
Triangles.
He's making triangles. That's a good Christmas present.
Just love Pinterest.
I always love getting triangles for Christmas.
That's because nobody ever gives you anything.
My question is, do you think he ever got a new tape measure? Because he had one that was a little defective. we found out several times that it was giving us the wrong links.
Just
Do
Joe.
you remember that?
Joe can't read a tape measure.
No,
It's
it was,
like,
it was defective.
When he was using the shop vac, and he was just vacuuming while I was routing and going all kinds of great and doing super things, but he forgot to plug it in.
All right, Road Trip Joe here. We're going to do this again because I wasn't recording. So my buddy.
This Jose no bueno por nada por Fuki.
Right, exactly. Steve is redoing the triangle project because
Daughter-in-law didn't want them that big. I hate Pinterest
Do you really? How come?
because women come up with all these silly ideas. And then, you gotta build this for me.
Oh. So she got this off Pinterest, not... This wasn't your idea, huh?
No.
Yeah, but think about it, Steve. This is an easy job.
This is pretty easy.
She could ask you to build a storage shed or
Or a house.
a house. There you go.